In this video, I'm going to be covering my 3 strategy approach when it comes to planning out your turn in the game of Warhammer 40k. So the command phase is an extremely and also underused phase of the game. Often people just use the command phase as giving a unit rerolls to hit, but what they're not actually doing is taking a step back and evaluating the game state. Evaluating the game state and planning your turn is going to be the one thing that separates you from an average player to becoming a really good player. A player, when you're at the table, which has got great confidence, you've got clarity and understanding what you need to do next. So I'm going to go over 3 stages. So if you're a beginner, I just want you to focus on the first 3. If you're a bit more of an intermediate player, I'm then going to give you another 3 things to consider when you're in the command phase. And then when you're a more advanced and more experienced player, I'm then going to give you another 3 things to consider. These 9 things are the things that I've watched so many top players use, and they may be considering all of this at once, but I can promise you it's happening all of the time in one single phase, and they continually go back to this in order to make sure that they're making progressions in the game. So let's start with the simple things. So if you're a beginner, you've only just started playing, the thing I want you to consider is which objectives this turn are you going to hold. So remember, you typically get points for holding 1, 2, and sometimes 3 objectives. So just pick 2 objectives to hold. Try not to pick any more. We've got other videos on how to hold objectives, but just focus on holding 2 objectives. The next thing I want you to consider is what secondary objectives are you going to score this turn. So planning this out now is really going to help you when it comes to planning your movement phase, which units you need to do actions with, and then which units you are going to be freed up to shoot with. And then the final thing that I want you to consider is which unit, and hence the singular term there, which unit are you going to kill this turn? So which unit of your opponents are you going to completely take off the table? Then any other remaining firepower can be deviated around, but just focus on killing that one unit because you've prioritized that as something that may be holding an objective or might score a secondary mission for your opponent next turn. So which unit are you going to kill? So if you're a little bit more experienced, maybe an intermediate, the next thing I now want you to think about is what threat are you going to neutralize? So this might be screening out a unit, stopping a unit from deep striking in. This could be move blocking a really heavy hitting unit that maybe you don't have the firepower to deal with, but you can move block it to stop and halt it in its progress. The next thing I want you to consider is what you're going to charge with and shoot with next turn. So those armies or those units with slightly shorter range or really rely on the combat phase, I want you to start thinking about your next turn because you need to use this next turn's movement phase to set up the turn after. And the last thing I want you to consider, if you're a bit more of an intermediate player, is which objective of your opponent can you deny? So how can you hold it over them holding it, or how can you eradicate them off from holding it completely? So again, they're your next 3 things you need to consider. Now, if you're more of an advanced and experienced player, these are another 3 things you need to add to your repertoire of decision making when it comes to the command phase. And this is quite a hard one, but how can you deny some of your opponent's secondary conditions? How are you going to maybe prevent them from doing certain actions? How are you going to stop them from holding certain areas of the table? The next thing you need to consider is the game tempo. Do you need to speed it up? Do you need to slow it down? And this really relies on scoring more than your opponent. So when are the turns that you're going to try and score that big 15 points? Is it going to be at the start of the game and get an early lead, force your opponent to play aggressive to kick you off them? Or are you going to play quite cagey and build up to a late game finish? And the final thing, and sometimes the hardest, is allowing your units to die. Which units are you happy to lose every turn? So again, focus your opponent on killing the things that you want to lose and you're happy to lose, make them play the game that you want to play, and make them make decisions based around the ones that you've already made, rather than just constantly reacting to what your opponent does, because you'll find yourself playing their game and you'll find yourself scoring less points than they do. Now, that's just my 9 ways to improve your decision making when it comes to the command phase, and there are plenty more, and that's not a complete exhaustive list, but they are 9 things that you can definitely consider, right from being a beginner to an advanced experienced player of the game. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you on the next one.